Okay. So let's get started. So we're going to start today. We're going to talk about observation over judgment. And we're going to start with a quote from Will Rogers. People's minds are changed through observation and not through argument. And the art, which is what we'll refer to it as, the art of observation is really about how do we, right, as individuals, how do we stay present and not be drawn into things like drama, anger, labels, and how do we stay neutral so that we're really absorbing and learning the most that we can. So a lot of time in observation, you find that too exuberant, or maybe we come too down. You know, what happens is we don't really fully, in either one of those, we don't really fully enjoy the moment because we're missing things. So being able to observe and kind of stay maybe in that neutral space, and it doesn't mean that we don't maybe feel some of the anguish, we will. And it doesn't mean that we don't feel the excitement, the love, the joy, we do. But it also means that we don't let it run away with us and that we don't become the emotion and that we stay centered, joyful, centered, joyful. What am I learning from joy or happiness? Centered, maybe what am I supposed to learn for maybe something not so pleasant, right? But all of them are learning experiences. And that's really what being an observation is. And so if you look at it really simply, is that observation expands your view. So if you think of observation as the ability to basically have a panoramic view of what's going on around you. And so if you take a look at this field, right? What do we see in this field? We see some rolling hills, we see clouds, we see blue sky. It looks like we have a cluster of trees off in the background, right? So we have more of a panoramic view of what's going on around us. When we start to live in judgment, then everything gets very narrow, like the other image we have, right? All we're doing is we're just peering through, in this particular case, that little seam in the rock wall, okay? And that's what happens when we start living in judgment. This is bad, this is right, this is wrong, okay? He said, she said, they did. All those types of things all become judgmental. What happens is now we start assigning labels. And you guys have probably heard me say this before, that we have all been a very binary culture. There's either one of two things, either right, wrong, up, down, left, right, black, white, whatever it is, okay? And we're almost forced, really, in how we've been socialized through schooling and extracurricular activities, you know, our parental involvements, grandparents, all these things, right? Because we're all from the same system. And we're almost forced to pick a label. Like we feel obligated to pick a label. And really, it's really what we don't want to do. Now, there's some behaviors that are clearly better than others, and there's some behaviors that are not so better than others, okay? That doesn't mean we don't call those out. It doesn't mean we don't deal with them. It just means that while we're in observation and we're not labeling it, while we're in observation, we have a greater opportunity to understand how someone got here with that thought, or we get to understand how, well, I'm having this experience, okay? How is this experience that I've had before? Now think about this for a minute. This happens to all of us. We have reoccurring experiences. They're not identical, but they're kind of the same, maybe with kind of the same outcome. Well, you're going to keep having the same experience until you learn from it. And so observation really gives you that opportunity to learn about what's going on, how is this event connected to other similar events that I've had or events I want to avoid in the future. What am I to learn from this? You have a lot of aha moments in observation. When you're in judgment, there's no aha moments because you've already made a decision. And that's the key about judgment, is that you've already made a decision. And, you know, we talk about labels. So labels in and of themselves are really self-limiting beliefs. Labeled something, you've really made a decision. Now, you might not look at it that way, but if you stop and you think about it, once we start labeling things, we've made a decision. This thing is X. This person is something. And those are labels, and they're very self-limiting. So, you know, an alternative view is we've got, maybe we've got some event that's got some bad behavior around it. Well, okay, we have to deal with the bad behavior, but not labeling it and not labeling somebody good or bad or difficult, or whatever the case may be, gives us the opportunity, because we've widened our scope of vision, to actually understand maybe where they've. Okay, I'm back. This was just a test to see if you guys were paying attention. I don't know what happened. Internet here is a little wonky, so I'm in Keen today. So in any event, so we're just talking about labels, right? Labels, in essence, become decisions. And once we label something, it becomes a decision. And like we talked about in the West, right? That's how we've been trained, is to make decisions through labeling. So let's just talk. We talked about this in the Thriving Through Uncertainty series, and this is really kind of the key to observation. So all of us travel around with an actor director. So as you see from the image here, right, we've got the director, which I'm going to use terms in like our higher self, right? And our higher self isn't necessarily in terms of higher, better, but higher from a viewpoint, right? Higher from a perspective of having greater altitude to be able to see what's going on, almost, you know, kind of looking down from above. Well, the actor, well, that's us doing our day-to-day thing. And so there is a connection, okay, between the director, the higher you, and the kind of the you on the ground, so to speak, right? The lower you, and again, not lower as in less than, just lower in proximity. And being an observation gives you the ability for lifetime feedback about how you're handling things, or what you're supposed to learn, or what in the moment, okay? And so it is that connection between living an observation, which is kind of the director, right? Giving you that feedback to you, the actor, right? Because we're here, we're in a physical form, we have to, you know, do our thing, right? And it gives you the ability, when you're living an observation, to give lifetime feedback so that you can make adjustments. So, you know, one of the things about being an athletic coach is that an athletic coach sees things that the player doesn't see. That's why he's the coach. So while the player's playing the game, you've got a coach or coaches that are watching what's going on, and they're able to give him feedback. Now, it's not necessarily live time feedback, but they're able to give the player or the team feedback. So you think about that relationship between the coach and the field. You can see what's going on, okay? The player, right, is here. He or she's playing the game. It's hard to see. It's the forest through the trees metaphor. And it's the same thing with the observation, okay? When I live in observation, when I function in observation, then what I do is I'm able to give myself, now in this case, it's instant feedback. It's live time. It's quantum feedback. You can't even measure it in time, right? And so I can give that feedback so that I can make adjustments to how I'm handling things, or to make sure that I'm not handling something the same way I did before. Maybe the outcome wasn't optimal. Now, one of the cool things about that is your script. Now we're going to keep going with the film set, the movie metaphor, okay? So all of us have developed a script. Now we have multiple scripts. We have our family script, we have our work script, we have our spousal script. We all have scripts about how we've learned to do things. Now, if in the movie industry, a lot of times that the script actually gets changed on the set because things aren't going the way that maybe the writer thought they would, or maybe the energy is different, or there needs to be more or less emotion or a different emotion, right? And so being the observer, giving yourself feedback so that you're making constant adjustments to how you're handling things. You're always trying to handle them better. You're always trying to handle them in a way that's more mindful and more thoughtful. And that's changing your script. Because all of us have learned behaviors, and go back, maybe we did this last week, talking about synaptic connections, neurons, right? So neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more we think one thought or the more we do one thing, it creates a connection, okay? Well, this is how we alter the connection. We alter the connection through changing our script by being an observation to feedback, feedback to adjustment, and that's how we change our script. Now think about your behaviors. So take today and think about how you're handling things. This is about being critical, don't pick yourself apart. But this is about just watching how you handle things. That's what's being an observation. And so follow that thread, right? It's your observation to the doing, to making adjustments, to changing the script. We're scripted for everything. Now, here's the good news, right? We can change the script. So experiences are for us to have and to learn from. They're not to define us. So our experiences don't define us. Now, you could be afraid of public speaking. One time in 7th grade, you had to read in front of the class for 5 minutes and read English, and maybe it didn't go so well, or somebody in the room made fun of you, and that 5-minute window, okay, will scar you for life, okay, for being in public speaking. But that's an experience that you're supposed to have to learn from, but it does not define you. And I'm a big believer that we're all spiritual beings benefiting from learning experiences while we're here. It's the whole reason why we're here. We're here to learn. We're not here to do anything else, right? If we were perfect, we wouldn't be here. So don't let experiences define you. So just 3 things about being an observation is that you cannot be an observation and judgment at the same time. It's impossible. It's like being in 2 places at the same time. Okay, you're either one or the other. You can't do both. You can't say, well, I'm really open-minded, but that's stupid. Those don't go together, okay? Observation gives you a neutral stance so that you can pivot from. When you've already labeled something and you've already moved in this direction, you're committed, okay? It's hard to pivot. So being in a neutral stance, being in a neutral position, okay, really allows you to find that moment where you can make the pivot, that right moment. but you can't do that if you're in judgment. And then I think lastly, being in neutral really gives you the opportunity to kind of float in the sea of possibilities, because there are endless possibilities and endless outcomes to any circumstance. Again, though, once we go into judgment, and once we start labeling things, or we start following the same script that we've always followed, well, then all of a sudden, we're no longer floating in the sea of possibilities. And so, you know, that's one of the things you always want to be able to look for the possibilities, so that you know what possibilities are orbiting, because there's a multitude of possibilities, not just one or two or three. But you can't do that if you're in judgment. So lastly, in practice, you know, how do you think being an observer would have served you better in a recent experience? And what would you have changed and how you handled it? Now, you don't have to limit this to you. It could be somebody else. But think about things that if I had a rush to judgment, or take the inverse of it. You know, I had an experience where that I didn't rush to judgment, and how well did that go? Right? You can do either or. But spend some time thinking about it. It's always beneficial to write them down, even if it's just on a scrap piece of paper or something like that. Okay, because it gives you the opportunity to let me back up for a second. There's something special. It's one thing to think something. It's another thing to write it down and say it. So the benefit of writing it down is that it helps you become more introspective. So if you have that opportunity, I'd encourage you to do so. Okay. So do we have any questions? See what we've got for chat here. This is a fun one. I like this one. Okay. Nope, no questions, just about my internet outage. So, all right, so great. It's good to be with everybody again. Have an amazing week. We're going to have wonderful weather, and we'll be right back here Monday. So, and I guess I'll see everybody else at 1 o'clock too, right? For our 1 o'clock company-wide call. Take care.